The air in Ben's workshop hung thick and sweet with the ghosts of 1,000 trees. It was a scent of raw potential, of cedar shavings and pine resin, a perfume of honest labor that clung to his clothes and settled deep in his lungs. Outside, the relentless hum of Los Angeles traffic was a distant, irrelevant beast. Here, within the four walls of his converted Echo Park garage, the only sounds were the rhythmic rasp of a hand plane against a plank of walnut and the soft ticking of a grandfather clock he was restoring for a client in Pasadena. Dust motes danced like constellations in the slanted afternoon light, illuminating the organized chaos of his domain. Hand-forged chisels arranged by size, saws gleaming with a thin coat of oil, and stacks of reclaimed lumber that held more history than most of the sterile glass-walled mansions in the hills. He ran a calloused thumb over the edge of the wood, feeling for imperfections, with a sensitivity that was more akin to a musician than a tradesman. This was his sanctuary, a place where the world made sense. Every joint, every grain, every precisely measured cut was a small act of truth in a city built on illusion. His declared income of $55,000 a year was another one of those truths, a number that defined him in the eyes of the world, and most painfully, in the eyes of his wife. It was a number that felt like a brand on his skin, a constant reminder of his perceived inadequacy, even as he planed a piece of wood worth more than his monthly salary. He sighed, the sound lost in the scrape of steel on timber, feeling the familiar weight of a life lived in two irreconcilable halves, a chasm that was growing wider with every passing day. The scent of his world was abruptly overwritten by another, more invasive fragrance the moment he stepped from the workshop into the small craftsman bungalow they called home. It was Serena's signature scent, a sharp, expensive floral that seemed designed to sterilize the air, to chemically erase any lingering trace of sawdust or varnish he might have carried in with him. The house, once his refuge, now felt like her showroom. The warm, lived-in character he'd loved had been systematically replaced by a cold, minimalist aesthetic meticulously curated for her Instagram feed. White walls, white furniture, a single artfully placed monstera plant in a ridiculously overpriced ceramic pot. It was a home designed not for living, but for being photographed. He saw her then, across the open-plan living room, her back to him. She was hunched over her phone, her thumbs swiping with a frantic intensity, curating her digital life, while the real one sat gathering dust. He could feel the chasm between them right there in the sterile air of the living room. A silent, yawning gap filled with her unspoken disappointment. He was the blue-collar embarrassment, the dirty carpenter, whose hands, capable of creating such beauty, were a social liability. He knew she saw him not as a craftsman, but as a failure, a roadblock on her path to the Beverly Hills lifestyle she so desperately craved. The love he remembered, the warmth and laughter from their early days, felt as distant as the moon, a faint light from a world that no longer existed. He watched her, a stranger in his own home, and a cold dread began to coil in his gut, a premonition that the foundation of their life together was even more fragile than he feared. If you enjoy stories of karma, hidden secrets, and the quiet power of the underestimated, subscribe now to witness how the truth always finds a way to surface. On the mantelpiece, amidst the sterile white decor, sat the one object that was entirely his, a defiant piece of history in her museum of modern aspirations. It was a rosewood box, no larger than a shoebox, but it held the weight of his entire secret world. He had carved it for her on their first anniversary, his hands working for weeks in the quiet hours after she'd gone to sleep. The wood was a deep, rich red, polished to a satin sheen that felt alive beneath his fingertips. He had inlaid an intricate pattern of entwined oak leaves, a symbol of strength and endurance, a silent prayer for their future. Each leaf was a marvel of precision, each vein a testament to his patience and his love. The joinery was seamless, the lid fitting so perfectly that it seemed to sigh when opened. It was, in his opinion, the most honest and beautiful thing he had ever made. To him, it was not just a box, it was a promise. It was the physical manifestation of his double life, the vault for his silent ambition. Inside this humble, hand-carved vessel, he meticulously deposited the earnings from his clandestine commissions as Artisan X, the ghost designer to the tech billionaires and Hollywood elite. It was their dream home fund, a name he'd whispered to her once, full of hope, a name she had long since forgotten. He looked at it now, a dark, organic shape against the stark white wall, and felt a pang of profound sadness. The box was meant to be a bridge between his two worlds, a shared dream, but it had become an island, a lonely monument to a secret she would never understand. Serena, of course, hated the box. She had made her contempt clear from the beginning, not with a dramatic outburst, but with the quiet, persistent cruelty of neglect and disdain. To her, it wasn't a symbol of love or a vessel of dreams. It was a tacky, rustic dust collector, an embarrassing relic of the man she was trying to polish away. He remembered the look on her face when he first presented it to her, the flicker of disappointment in her eyes that she tried and failed to mask with a polite, thin-lipped smile. "It's quaint, Ben," she had said, the word landing like a stone in his heart. Since then, her war against the box had been one of attrition. She would move it from the coffee table to a bookshelf, then from the bookshelf to a dark corner behind a potted plant, hoping he wouldn't notice. When he would quietly move it back to its place of honor on the mantel, she would sigh with the theatrical exasperation of a martyr. He knew that when her influencer friends came over, she would hide it away completely, stuffing it into a closet as if it were a shameful family secret. The irony was a blade that twisted in his gut daily. She despised the very container that held the key to the life she so desperately craved. She would scroll through Zillow for hours, sighing over glass-walled mansions in the Hollywood Hills, completely oblivious to the fact that the down payment, and indeed the entire purchase price, for any one of them was sitting right there on her mantelpiece, disguised as a piece of tacky folk art. Her blindness to its true value was more than just an oversight. It was a reflection of her blindness to his. His secret life began at 11 p.m., long after the manufactured glow of Serena's ring light had been extinguished and the house had fallen into a restless silence. This was when Ben the carpenter ceased to exist, and Artisan X was born. He would retreat to his workshop, the familiar scent of sawdust a comforting balm to his frayed nerves. He'd power on a separate, encrypted laptop, one Serena knew nothing about, and enter a world of coded emails, non-disclosure agreements, and wire transfers with dizzying strings of zeros. As Artisan X, he was not a humble tradesman, he was a legend, a myth whispered among the ultra-wealthy. He was the ghost designer who crafted bespoke furniture pieces for Silicon Valley titans and A-list celebrities, pieces that were more sculpture than furniture, status symbols that sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars apiece. The work was demanding, requiring a level of artistry and precision that pushed his skills to their absolute limit. He designed conference tables for tech moguls that seemed to float on air, and hand-carved bed frames for movie stars that were works of narrative art. The pressure was immense, but so was the thrill. It was a silent, intoxicating power, knowing that the hands Serena dismissed as dirty were shaping the very aesthetic of the world she idolized. The duality was a heavy burden. During the day, he'd haggle over a $200 repair job, feeling the sting of Serena's judgment. At night, he'd authorize a six-figure materials budget without blinking. The whiplash was exhausting, a constant, dizzying shift between two realities. He was living a lie, but it was a lie in service of what he believed was a beautiful truth, a future he was building for them. One magnificent, secret piece at a time. The number on the screen of his encrypted banking app was abstract, almost comical in its magnitude. 28, 457, 321, 18. It was a figure that bore no resemblance to his physical reality. He could feel the splinters in his fingers, smell the varnish on his clothes, but he couldn't feel the weight of $28 million. It was a phantom fortune, held in a complex web of offshore accounts and shell companies set up by a discreet financial advisor in Zurich. It was the culmination of a decade of sleepless nights, of living a double life with the constant gnawing fear of exposure. His plan had always been simple, a grand romantic gesture of cinematic proportions. For years, Serena had maintained a vision board, a digital collage of her aspirations. The centerpiece was always the same, a stunning architectural masterpiece in the Hollywood Hills, a marvel of glass and steel with an infinity pool that bled into the skyline. She would stare at it for hours, her expression a mixture of longing and bitterness. She had no idea that he had already been in contact with the property's owner, an aging film producer looking to downsize. He had a standing offer, ready to be executed at a moment's notice. The plan was to buy it in cash, to have the irrevocable deed placed inside the rosewood box, and to present it to her on their 10th anniversary. It was to be the ultimate reveal, the moment he could finally shed the skin of the dirty carpenter and show her the man he truly was, the man who had built an empire for her in secret. He imagined the look on her face, the shock, the awe, The realization. It was this fantasy, this single perfect moment of vindication, that fueled him through the years of deception. He first saw the name Preston illuminated on Serena's phone screen. She had left it on the kitchen counter, face up, while she was in the shower. A notification popped up, a preview of a message that made the air in his lungs turn to ice. "Can't wait to close this deal, babe. Freedom is so close." The message was accompanied by a profile picture. A man with teeth too white, a tan too orange, and the kind of slick, predatory smile that Ben instinctively distrusted. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive but fit poorly, the universal uniform of the try-hard. Ben's mind raced. A deal? Freedom? He knew he shouldn't, but a primal, self-preservationist instinct took over. His hands, usually so steady, trembled as he picked up her phone. Her password, ironically, was their anniversary. He navigated to her messages, his heart hammering against his ribs. The thread with Preston was a novel of deceit. He was a wealth coach, a charlatan peddling get-rich-quick schemes and empty promises. Their messages were a nauseating mix of flirtatious banter and discussions about leveraging assets and liquidating for our new venture. Serena's messages were filled with complaints about her dead-end life and her ball-and-chain husband, who had no ambition. Each word was a small, sharp shard of glass embedding itself in his heart. He saw pictures of them together, at rooftop bars he couldn't afford, in restaurants he'd only read about. She was smiling in a way he hadn't seen in years, a vibrant, unburdened smile that belonged to another life, with another man. He placed the phone back on the counter, his movements stiff and robotic, just as the water in the shower shut off. He felt a profound, chilling sense of dislocation, as if he were watching a movie of his own life, and the plot had just taken a sickening, irreversible turn. The arguments about money had become the soundtrack to their marriage. They were a constant, low-grade hum of resentment that occasionally flared into a wildfire of accusation and bitterness. Serena had a unique talent for making his $55,000 salary feel like an act of personal aggression against her. She would leave magazines open on the coffee table, circled articles about lavish vacations in the Maldives, or $1,000 handbags. She would talk about her friends, whose husbands were in finance or in tech, their titles dripping with a mixture of envy and accusation. "Jessica's husband just leased her a new G-Wagon," she'd say, staring at him over her quinoa salad, her meaning perfectly clear. It must be nice not to have to worry about things. Each comment was a carefully aimed dart, designed to make him feel small, inadequate, and fundamentally broken. He would stand there, covered in a fine layer of sawdust, his hands aching from a day of honest work, and absorb her disappointment. The secret fortune was a scream building in his throat, a truth so immense it threatened to tear him apart. He wanted to shake her, to tell her about the accounts, about the plan, about the house in the hills. He wanted to show her that he was not the man she thought he was. But he held his tongue, clinging to the fantasy of his grand reveal. He believed, with a desperate, foolish optimism, that the final act would redeem all the struggles that came before it. So he played his part, the struggling carpenter, the unambitious husband, letting her believe he was the anchor holding her back, all the while knowing he was secretly building the ship that was meant to carry them both to a new world. The phone call shattered the quiet rhythm of his afternoon. He was in the middle of a delicate inlay, his concentration absolute, when his phone buzzed violently on the workbench. It was Serena. He answered, a sliver of annoyance in his voice, which immediately evaporated when he heard the sound on the other end. It was a choked, theatrical sob, a performance of panic so complete it was almost believable. "Ben! Oh God, Ben, you have to come home!" she cried, her voice artificially high and strained. "We've been robbed. They broke in. They took everything." He felt a surge of adrenaline, a cold wave of fear that had nothing to do with material possessions. His first thought was for her. Was she hurt? Was she safe? The workshop, his sanctuary, suddenly felt like a cage. He dropped his tools, the clatter of steel on concrete echoing the sudden chaos in his mind. He bombarded her with questions. "Are you okay? Where are you? Did you call the police?" Her answers were fragmented, punctuated by more sobs. "I'm fine. I just got home. The window is smashed. Oh, Ben, the box. They took the box. All our savings. Everything is gone." The mention of the box sent a different kind of chill through him. The money inside was a pittance, a tiny fraction of the real fortune, but its symbolic value was immeasurable. He was already moving, grabbing his keys, his mind a frantic blur of concern and a new, unsettling thought that he couldn't yet articulate. A tiny, sharp-edged suspicion that pricked at the edge of his consciousness. The drive from Echo Park to their bungalow was a surreal nightmare. The familiar streets of Los Angeles, usually a backdrop to his daily routine, became a distorted landscape of anxiety. The palm trees seemed to claw at the sky, and the relentless California sun felt accusatory. His hands gripped the steering wheel of his old pickup truck, the worn leather a stark contrast to the slick, imaginary world of offshore accounts and eight-figure bank balances. The irony was suffocating. Here he was, a man with the financial power to solve almost any problem, completely helpless. The $28 million was a useless abstraction, a ghost in a machine half a world away. It couldn't unsmash a window, it couldn't soothe his wife's manufactured panic, and it couldn't erase the cold knot of dread tightening in his stomach. He replayed her words in his head. They took the box. It felt rehearsed, too specific. A real victim would be worried about jewelry, electronics, personal safety. But she had focused on the box, the one item that represented their shared, humble savings. He pushed the thought away, ashamed of his own cynicism. This was his wife, the woman he had loved, the woman he had built a secret empire for. She was in distress. His duty was to comfort and protect her. Yet, the suspicion lingered. An unwelcome passenger in the cab of his truck, whispering doubts that grew louder with every mile that brought him closer to the life he thought he knew. A life that was about to be irrevocably shattered. He pulled up to the house, his tires crunching on the gravel driveway, and his carpenter's eye immediately began to deconstruct the scene. The broken window was the first thing that felt wrong. It was the small window in the guest bathroom at the side of the house, partially obscured by a large bougainvillea bush. It was an unlikely point of entry, but it was the nature of the break that truly bothered him. The glass wasn't shattered outward, as it would be from a forceful impact from the outside. Instead, most of the shards were on the exterior, littering the flower bed below. It looked as if it had been broken from the inside. A small, crucial detail that screamed, staged. He walked into the house, his heart a cold, heavy stone in his chest. The mess was equally theatrical. A few drawers were pulled out, their contents spilled onto the floor, but nothing of value seemed to be missing. Serena's laptop was still on the kitchen table. Her expensive jewelry box was untouched on the dresser. It was the work of a remarkably polite and discerning thief, one who was apparently interested only in a hand-carved wooden box containing a few $1,000s in cash. The air in the house was thick with the cloying scent of Serena's perfume and the bitter aroma of deceit. He felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were a detective arriving at a crime scene, and the victim, the perpetrator, and the entire narrative were all laid out before him, a poorly written play he was being forced to watch. Serena ran to him the moment he stepped through the door, throwing herself into his arms in a display of frantic relief. Her body trembled against his, but he could feel the subtle, mechanical quality of her shudders, the practiced rhythm of a performer. She buried her face in his shoulder, her sobs muffled by his sawdust-covered shirt. "I was so scared, Ben," she whispered, her voice a perfect symphony of vulnerability and trauma. "I walked in and saw the glass, and then I saw the mantle, and it was gone." He held her, his arms moving with a strange robotic autonomy. He was playing his part now, the concerned husband, rubbing her back and murmuring soothing words he didn't feel. He could smell the lie on her, a scent more potent than her expensive perfume. He looked over her shoulder at the living room, at the artfully arranged chaos, and saw it not as his home, but as a set. Every overturned cushion, every spilled drawer, was a piece of set dressing, placed with intention. He was an actor who had just been handed a script, and he was expected to read his lines without question. He felt a profound, soul-crushing disappointment that was far worse than anger. This elaborate charade wasn't just about the money in the box. It was a fundamental betrayal of their shared history, a declaration that everything he thought was real had been nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. "The box," she said, pulling away from him, her eyes wide and brimming with perfectly formed tears. "They took the box, Ben. All of it. The Dream Home Fund." The way she said the words, Dream Home Fund, was the cruelest cut of all. She resurrected the phrase from the graveyard of their early, hopeful years, weaponizing his own dream against him. Her performance was masterful. She walked over to the mantelpiece and traced a finger along the empty space where the box used to sit, her shoulders slumping in feigned devastation. All those years of saving, just gone. Ben watched her, a cold, clinical detachment settling over him. He wasn't losing the money. He was losing the last lingering shred of the woman he thought he had married. The box wasn't just a container for cash. It was a vessel for his love, his hope, his decade-long secret. Its absence didn't signify a financial loss, but a spiritual one. It was the theft of a symbol, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the thief was standing right in front of him, her face a mask of counterfeit grief. He felt a strange calm descend upon him, the kind of clarity that comes in the immediate aftermath of a catastrophe. The emotional part of his brain seemed to shut down, replaced by a cold, calculating logic. The game had changed, and the rules were no longer his. Later that night, the house was unnaturally quiet. The police had come and gone, their perfunctory investigation leaving no answers, only a thin layer of graphite powder on the windowsill and a hollow sense of violation. Serena had taken a sedative and was now sleeping soundly, or at least pretending to, her breathing even and deep in the master bedroom. But sleep was an impossible luxury for Ben. He sat in the dark of his workshop, the familiar shapes of his tools offering little comfort. The air, usually so full of the promise of creation, felt stagnant and heavy with the weight of his shattered reality. He replayed the day's events over and over, his mind a relentless loop of inconsistencies. The glass falling outwards, the selective nature of the theft, Serena's oddly specific grief, focused solely on the one object she had always despised. It was a puzzle with only one possible solution, a truth so ugly he had been trying to avoid looking at it directly. But now, in the solitude of the night, the truth was inescapable. She had done this. She had staged the entire event. The realization didn't come with a surge of hot anger, but with a deep, glacial coldness that seemed to freeze his very soul. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that it felt less like an emotional wound and more like a physical event, as if a vital organ had been surgically removed without anesthesia. The thought of the camera came to him like a whisper in the dark. It was a small, discreet security camera, no bigger than a thumb, that he had installed in a high corner of the workshop a few months ago, after a valuable shipment of ebony had been stolen from his porch. It was motion-activated and recorded to a secure cloud server. Its wide-angle lens, he realized with a jolt, had a perfect, unobstructed view of the back of the house, including the guest bathroom window and the back door. His heart began to pound, a slow, heavy drumbeat in the oppressive silence. He was terrified. He was terrified of being wrong, of unjustly suspecting the woman he loved. But he was even more terrified of being right. The footage on that server was either his salvation or his damnation. It would either expose his paranoia and fill him with a lifetime of guilt, or it would confirm his darkest fears and obliterate the last vestiges of his marriage. He sat motionless for a long time, the fate of his world resting on a single click of a mouse. With hands that felt like they belonged to someone else, he powered on his encrypted laptop. The soft glow of the screen illuminated his face, casting long, distorted shadows across the workshop. He navigated to the security app, his breath catching in his throat as he entered his password. The interface loaded, showing a timeline of recorded events. His eyes scanned the timestamps, his blood running cold when he saw it. A motion-activated recording that started at 2:15 p.m., just 45 minutes before Serena's frantic call. He clicked on the file. The loading icon spun for an eternity, each rotation tightening the knot of dread in his stomach. Then, the video began to play. The quality was crystal clear, the afternoon light rendering the scene in sharp, unforgiving detail. He saw the back of his own house, the bougainvillea bush swaying gently in the breeze. For a moment, nothing happened, and a wave of relief washed over him. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe a stranger really had broken in. But then, the back door opened, and Serena stepped out. She was calm, her movements fluid, and the morning light in their Echo Park bungalow was a cold, clinical thing, not the warm, golden promise he remembered from their early years. It was a filtered, sterile light, bouncing off the stark white walls and the polished concrete floors that Serena had insisted upon during her last, minimalist refresh. Ben felt the chill of it seep into his bones as he swung his legs out of bed, his bare feet recoiling from the icy touch of the floor. The house no longer smelled of coffee and sleep. It was permanently perfumed with her signature scent, a sharp, aggressive floral that felt less like a fragrance and more like an industrial solvent designed to scrub away any trace of his existence. He moved through the space like a ghost in his own home, his footsteps unnaturally loud in the cathedral-like silence. Every object was a testament to her aspirations. A single, ridiculously expensive fiddle leaf fig in the corner, a stack of art books on the glass coffee table that he knew she had never opened, a white linen sofa that was more of a museum piece than a place to sit. He was a smudge of sawdust in her pristine gallery, a living contradiction to the brand she was meticulously curating for her online followers. He saw her across the open-plan living area, already bathed in the blue glow of her phone, her thumb swiping with a surgeon's precision. He padded into the kitchen, the cold of the floor traveling up his spine, and reached for his old work coat, a thick canvas jacket hanging from a solitary hook by the back door. It was the only hook she allowed, a grudging concession to his messy reality. The coat was a map of his life's work, stained with the rich, dark tones of walnut varnish, dotted with the pale ghosts of wood glue, and smelling faintly and permanently of cedar and honest labor. To Ben, it was armor, a symbol of his craft and his integrity. He slid his arms into the familiar worn sleeves, the rough fabric a comforting weight on his shoulders. "You're not actually going to wear that, are you?" Serena's voice cut through the silence, sharp and brittle as a shard of glass. He turned. She was leaning against the white marble island, holding a delicate porcelain mug, her face a mask of carefully curated disdain. She was dressed in a matching set of dove-gray athleisure wear that he knew cost more than his weekly grocery budget. "It's my work coat, Serena," he said, his voice flat. She let out a long, theatrical sigh, a sound of profound suffering. "Ben, we've talked about this. Image is everything. What if someone from the brand I'm trying to partner with sees you? It's just embarrassing." He felt the familiar hot flush of shame creep up his neck, a feeling he had learned to swallow down like bile. He was the living, breathing obstacle to her next sponsorship deal, a walking embodiment of everything she was trying to escape. If you enjoy stories of karma, hidden secrets, and the quiet power of the underestimated, subscribe now to witness how the truth always finds a way to surface. His gaze fell to his backpack, slumped by the door like a loyal, tired dog. It was an old, olive-drab canvas pack, a relic from his college days that had proven too durable and practical to ever replace. Its leather bottom was scuffed, its heavy brass zippers were burnished from years of use, and its straps were molded perfectly to the shape of his shoulders. "And that thing," she said, her lip curling slightly. "Honestly, Ben, it looks like something you found in an alley. Jessica's husband has a Toomey briefcase. Even Mark has a leather messenger bag from Shinola. It's about projecting success." He wanted to scream. He wanted to tell her that inside that thing were the preliminary sketches for a hand-carved conference table for a tech billionaire, a commission that would net him more than her precious Jessica's husband made in a year. He wanted to explain that the value of an object wasn't in its brand name, but in its utility and its history. But he knew it would be pointless. Her understanding of value was only skin deep, a currency measured in Instagram likes and brand recognition. Instead, he simply bent over, the muscles in his back protesting, and slung the familiar weight over his shoulder. She saw a poor man's burden, completely oblivious to the fact that it was the satchel of a secret millionaire. As he straightened up, the cuff of his jacket rode up his wrist, revealing his watch. It was another of his cardinal sins. The timepiece was simple, a utilitarian field watch with a scratched crystal and a worn nylon strap. It had been his father's, a man who had also worked with his hands, a man who believed that an object's purpose was to perform its function reliably and without fanfare. The steady, quiet tick of the watch was a connection to him, a constant reminder of where he came from and the values he held dear. Serena, of course, saw none of this. The Royal Oak. Now, that is a watch. It's an investment. It says something about a person. The mention of Preston, her new, slick wealth coach, sent a small, sharp pain through his chest. He instinctively pulled his sleeve down, covering the watch as if to protect it from her corrosive judgment. He felt a surge of protective anger, not for himself, but for his father's memory, for the simple, honest world that this watch represented. It was a world that had no place in her glossy, curated reality. He realized with a profound and chilling clarity that she was fundamentally incapable of understanding that some things had a value that could never be appraised, marketed, or sold. He was at the door now, his hand on the cold, stainless steel knob, desperate for the sanctuary of his truck, for the familiar scent of sawdust that would wash away the sterile perfume of his own home. He could feel her eyes on his back, a physical weight of disapproval. He braced himself for one last parting shot. For a moment, there was only silence. and he allowed himself a sliver of hope that she might let him go in peace. But the silence was just her drawing a breath, aiming her final, most potent dart. "Ben," she said, her voice dropping into a tone of feigned, condescending concern. "Just try not to get too filthy today, okay? The last thing I need is for one of my followers to see my husband looking like a dirty carpenter." He couldn't let her see the look in his eyes. He felt the insult land not like a slap, but like a key turning a lock deep inside him, opening a door to a room he had kept sealed for a very long time. It was a room filled with cold, quiet, calculated rage. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, a final act of his long-running performance as the submissive, unambitious husband. He opened the door and stepped out into the cool morning air. But the insult didn't follow him. It settled deep in his gut, not as a wound, but as fuel, the final piece of kindling for a fire she would never see coming. The words, "dirty carpenter," had been the kindling, dry and brittle, stacked carefully in a corner of his soul for weeks. But the phone call was the lit match. He was in the workshop, his hands steady, his mind a quiet lake of concentration as he meticulously fitted a dovetail joint. The world outside, Serena's world of brands and appearances, was a distant, muffled noise. Here, there was only the truth of wood, the honesty of a perfect fit. The screen lit up with her name, and a familiar weariness settled over him before he even answered. But the voice that met his ear was not the usual tone of bored disappointment. It was a high-pitched, theatrical shriek of manufactured panic. "Ben, oh my God, you have to come home. We've been robbed." The words were a physical blow, and for a split second, his world tilted. A primal fear, hot and sharp, shot through him. A fear entirely for her safety. He dropped his chisel, the sound of fine steel clattering against the concrete floor, a sharp, ugly punctuation mark in the sudden chaos of his mind. "Are you okay? Did you call the police? Where are you?" he demanded, his voice tight with adrenaline. Her answers came between choked, unconvincing sobs. "I'm fine. I just got here. The window is smashed. Oh, Ben." And then came the line that stopped the frantic beating of his heart and replaced it with a single, cold, heavy thud. "The box. They took the rosewood box. All our savings. Everything is gone." The specificity of it, the immediate focus on the one object she despised, was a discordant note in her symphony of terror. A tiny, ice-cold splinter of suspicion lodged itself in his mind, and as he grabbed his keys, the image of her face was no longer that of a victim, but of an actress hitting her mark. The drive back to the bungalow was a journey through a nightmare landscape. The familiar sun-drenched streets of Los Angeles felt alien, the palm trees like skeletal fingers clawing at a sky that was too bright, too indifferent. He gripped the worn leather steering wheel of his old Ford F-150, his knuckles white, his mind a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. His carpenter's eye, the part of his brain trained to see the world in terms of structure, stress points, and integrity, began to deconstruct her story. A professional thief would go for electronics, for the jewelry she shamelessly flaunted on Instagram. They wouldn't bother with a small side window, partially obscured by a thorny bougainvillea bush. They wouldn't ignore a MacBook Pro to steal a tacky wooden box that, to any outside observer, looked like a piece of amateur folk art. He pulled up to the house, his tires crunching on the driveway, and the first thing he saw confirmed his fears. The broken window wasn't just a point of entry, it was a piece of evidence, and it was telling a story completely different from Serena's. The majority of the glass shards were scattered on the flower bed outside, glittering in the afternoon sun. He didn't need a forensic accounting degree to understand the physics of it. The window had been broken from the inside, a clumsy but damning mistake in an otherwise carefully staged production. He walked through the front door into a scene of calculated chaos. A few couch cushions were tossed on the floor. A drawer in the console table was pulled open. Its contents, old mail and takeout menus, spilled onto the rug. It was a minimalist's interpretation of a burglary, designed for maximum visual impact with minimal actual disruption. Serena's laptop sat untouched on the kitchen island. Her diamond earrings, the ones he knew she'd bought on credit, were still on the nightstand. Her body trembled against his, but he could feel the subtle, unnatural rhythm of it. The controlled shudders of someone acting out an emotion rather than feeling it. "I was so scared," she whispered into his shoulder, her voice muffled against the rough canvas of his work coat. He held her, his arms moving on autopilot, murmuring the soothing platitudes the script demanded of him. He was no longer a husband comforting his wife. He was an unwilling actor in a one-woman show, and the set was his own home. He looked over her shoulder at the mantelpiece, at the stark, empty space where the rosewood box used to sit. The box was a symbol of his love, a testament to his patience, and the vault of his secret ambition. Its absence was not a theft of money, but a theft of meaning, an erasure of their shared history orchestrated by the woman currently feigning grief in his arms. "The box," she said, pulling away just enough to look at him, her eyes wide and glistening with crocodile tears. "They took our dream home fund, Ben. Everything we worked for." The words twisted in his gut like a dull blade. She had resurrected the name from the depths of their history, a phrase he hadn't heard her utter in years, and was now using it as the centerpiece of her lie. It was a masterstroke of emotional manipulation, designed to wound him in the most precise and painful way possible. He watched, a cold clinical observer, as she walked to the mantel and traced the empty space with a trembling finger, her shoulders slumping in a portrait of devastation. The betrayal was so complete, so breathtaking in its audacity, that it transcended mere anger. It was a paradigm shift. The woman he had spent a decade working to surprise, the woman for whom he had built a secret empire, was a stranger. She was not his partner. She was his adversary. That night, after the police had come and gone, leaving behind a flimsy report and the faint smell of graphite powder, the house fell into a heavy, watchful silence. Serena, claiming emotional exhaustion, had taken one of her anxiety pills and retreated to the bedroom. Ben knew she wasn't sleeping. She was waiting. He retreated to his own sanctuary, the workshop, the familiar scent of cedar and pine, a stark contrast to the sterile deception of the house. He sat in the dark, surrounded by the honest tools of his trade, and let the pieces of the puzzle click into place. The glass, the selective theft, her flawless performance. It was no longer a suspicion. It was a certainty, a truth as solid and unyielding as the slab of granite he used for sharpening his planes. The thought surfaced, not as a flash of inspiration, but as a slow, dawning realization in the quiet dark of the workshop. The camera. Months ago, after a valuable piece of imported zebra wood had vanished from his porch, he had installed a small, motion-activated security camera high in the corner of the workshop. It was no bigger than his thumb, its lens barely visible against the dark wood of the rafters. Its purpose was to watch his tools, his lumber, his deliveries. But its wide-angle lens, he now realized with a surge of icy adrenaline, had a perfect, unobstructed view of the entire back of the bungalow, including the guest bathroom window and the back door. His heart, which had been a dull, heavy stone in his chest, began to hammer with a frantic, suffocating rhythm. He was standing on a precipice. The footage on that camera's secure cloud server was either an indictment of his own paranoia or the irrefutable proof of Serena's betrayal. It was the truth, raw and unedited, and he was terrified of it. A part of him, the part that still clung to the ghost of the woman he had married, wanted to leave it, to walk away and let the lie stand. It would be easier to accept the story, to mourn the loss of a few $1,000s and move on. But the craftsman in him, the man who planned wood down to the thousandth of an inch in pursuit of a perfect surface, couldn't abide a flawed reality. With hands that felt disconnected from his body, he walked to his encrypted laptop, the one Serena knew nothing about, and powered it on. The soft glow illuminated his face, a mask of grim resolve. He navigated to the security software, his breath held tight in his lungs, and found the file. Time-stamped, 2:15 p.m. He clicked play, and the spinning loading icon felt like a countdown to the end of his world. The video played without sound at first, a silent, damning pantomime. Serena stepped out the back door, not with the furtive, anxious movements of a conspirator, but with the casual, bored air of someone taking out the trash. She placed the rosewood box on the patio table, the sun glinting off the polished wood he had spent 100 hours sanding to a perfect satin finish. He watched as her hands, the same hands he had held and cherished, opened the box he had carved as a symbol of their future. There was no sentimentality in the action, no flicker of hesitation. She worked with a brisk, business-like efficiency, her movements economical and precise. He saw her pull out the stacks of cash, the physical manifestation of his secret life, of sleepless nights and sawdust-filled lungs. She didn't even count it, just stuffed it callously into a ridiculously expensive designer handbag he'd never seen before, a purse that likely cost more than a month of his declared income. Then came the most surreal, most soul-destroying part. She picked up a small hammer from his own outdoor tool rack. a tool he himself had used to build the very planters she now ignored. She walked to the guest bathroom window, paused for a moment to wrap the hammerhead in a dish towel, a small, intelligent detail that made the act feel even more premeditated, and then swung. The glass didn't shatter. It gave way with a soft, muffled crack. She carefully poked out the remaining shards with the handle, ensuring most of them fell outside onto the flower bed. He felt the air leave his lungs in a silent, agonizing rush. The scene was a masterpiece of cold, calculated betrayal. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a business transaction. And as she pulled out her phone, a triumphant, venomous smile spreading across her face, he knew the final, killing blow was about to land. He fumbled with the laptop settings, his fingers numb and clumsy, and unmuted the audio just as her call connected. Preston's face appeared on her screen, slick and reptilian, his teeth a predatory white against his spray tan. "Is it done?" Preston's voice was tinny and distorted through the phone's speaker, but the arrogance was unmistakable. Serena laughed, a sound so genuinely light and carefree that it physically hurt Ben to hear it. It was a laugh he hadn't heard in years, a laugh from a life he was not a part of. "Like clockwork, babe," she said, panning her phone's camera to show off her handiwork. The broken window, the cash now safely stowed in her bag. He'll buy the whole story. The big, dumb carpenter will come running home to save his damsel in distress. The words, "dumb carpenter," struck him with the force of a physical blow, knocking the last of the air from his chest. He felt a profound, chilling detachment, as if he were floating above his own body, watching a stranger's life crumble. "He's so predictable," she continued, her voice dripping with a contempt that felt ancient and profound. "Worried about his tacky little box and a few $1,000s while we're about to cash in the real lottery ticket." Preston smirked. "Just stick to the script. Cry. A lot. We'll give it a week for the trauma to set in, then you leave. Freedom is so close, babe." She blew a kiss at the screen, and the video ended. Ben didn't move. He sat in the echoing silence of his workshop, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the tears he wasn't aware he was shedding. The grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight on his sternum. But beneath it, something else was beginning to stir. A deep, glacial coldness, a quiet, hardening rage that was slowly, methodically turning his heartbreak into steel. The grief lasted for precisely 7 minutes. He allowed himself that, a finite period, to mourn the death of his marriage, the obliteration of a decade of his life. Then, the cold logic of the craftsman took over. The video was the what. Now he needed the why and the how. Her laptop, the sleek white MacBook she treated like a holy relic, was still on the kitchen island. Getting it felt like infiltrating enemy territory. He moved from the workshop into the house, each footstep a conscious, deliberate act. The air inside felt different now, heavy with the stench of her betrayal, a smell that overpowered her expensive perfume. He could hear her soft, even breathing from the bedroom, the performative sleep of the victor. He imagined her lying there, dreaming of Preston and his stolen future. The thought sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated ice through his veins. He picked up the laptop. It felt alien in his hands, a cold, smooth slate of deceit. Back in the workshop, he powered it on. The password prompt appeared. He tried her birthday. Denied. Her pet's name. Denied. Then, with a surge of bitter, corrosive irony, he typed in the date of their anniversary. Access granted. The screen opened to her desktop, an artfully arranged landscape of her curated life. He ignored the folders of selfies and brand logos and went straight for her email. It was a digital diary of her conspiracy. He started scrolling, his eyes scanning subject lines that read like chapter titles in a pulp thriller. Asset liquidation strategy. Our new venture. The BC problem. He clicked on one from Preston, dated 3 months prior. The subject was simple, chillingly direct. Phase 1. The siphon. His blood ran cold as he realized the staged burglary wasn't the beginning of her betrayal, but the grand finale of a much longer con. He spent the next 4 hours conducting an autopsy of his own life. The emails laid out the entire conspiracy in meticulous, sickening detail. Preston, the wealth coach, was a common charlatan who specialized in bleeding dissatisfied spouses dry. Their plan was laid out in spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations filled with corporate buzzwords that barely concealed their crude, simple greed. He saw the siphon phase documented in her bank statements, which he found saved in a password-protected folder labeled Vision Board Finances. For months, she'd been taking cash from the Rosewood box. His secret, sacred earnings, and making small, untraceable deposits into a new account. From there, the money flowed out to fund her affair: $500 dinners at Nobu, weekend trips to Santa Barbara, a down payment on a leased BMW for Preston. Every transaction was a small, sharp knife twisting in his gut. He saw the man he was supposed to be, the dirty carpenter, funding the very lifestyle his wife was using to betray him. But the theft was only part of it. He found legal documents, drafts of emails to a divorce attorney. Preston had coached her on how to build a case, advising her to document Ben's lack of ambition and financial instability to maximize her potential alimony claim. They were planning to use the trauma of the robbery as the catalyst for the divorce, painting her as a victim fleeing an unsupportive, unsuccessful husband. It was then that the last remnants of sadness evaporated, calcifying into something harder and far more dangerous. He was not a heartbroken husband. He was a target in a meticulously planned financial assault. The final discovery came just as the first pale, gray light of dawn began to creep into the workshop. Buried deep in a nested folder labeled Contingencies, he found the document that sealed her fate. It wasn't a legal brief or a bank statement. It was a draft of an anonymous tip letter addressed to the Internal Revenue Service. The letter was a work of pure, unadulterated malice. It described a local carpenter, Benjamin Carter of Echo Park, who was suspected of running a significant, undeclared cash business on the side. It hinted at tax evasion and hidden assets, providing just enough plausible detail to trigger a full-scale, life-destroying forensic accounting audit. This was their endgame. It wasn't enough to leave him and steal his money. They had to salt the earth behind them. They planned to ruin his reputation, bury him in legal fees, and destroy the legitimate $55,000 a year business he had built with his own two hands. The sheer cruelty of it took his breath away. The woman he had planned to gift a mansion to was, in turn, planning to make him homeless. He closed the laptop with a soft, definitive click. The silence in the workshop was absolute. The man who had sat down at this bench hours ago, a victim drowning in grief, was gone. In his place sat Artisan X, a man who controlled a $28 million empire built on precision, patience, and absolute discretion. He had been building a dream for a woman who was, in reality, a saboteur. Now he would pivot. He would apply the same meticulous, unforgiving standards he used for his craft to the controlled demolition of hers. He picked up his own encrypted phone, the cold glass a comforting weight in his hand, and dialed the number of a man in Zurich. The first move in a game Serena and Preston had no idea they were about to lose. He walked out of the house without a backward glance. The click of the door shutting behind him was not the sound of a retreat, but the definitive sound of a vault being sealed, entombing a decade of his life within those sterile white walls. He didn't get into his truck immediately. Instead, he stood for a moment on the cracked pavement of the driveway, the morning sun feeling cool on his skin, a stark contrast to the glacial fire burning in his chest. The dirty carpenter persona, the skin he had worn for so long as a protective camouflage for his ambition, now felt like a finely tailored weapon. He had played the part of the simple, unambitious husband so perfectly that even he had sometimes forgotten where the performance ended and the man began. But the video had been a brutal, clarifying solvent, dissolving the character and leaving only the architect of the lie. He reached into the pocket of his worn canvas jacket, his calloused fingers bypassing his regular phone and closing around the cool, smooth weight of a second, encrypted device. This was the phone of Artisan X, a ghost in the global machine. He got into his truck, the familiar scent of sawdust and oil, a grounding force in the chaos of his shattered reality. He didn't start the engine. He sat in the silence, the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams, slanting through the windshield, and scrolled to a single contact saved under the name Zurich. He pressed the call button, and the phone connected with a series of clicks and whirs that sounded like a key turning in a distant high-security lock. A crisp, unaccented voice answered on the second ring. Yes? Ben's own voice, when he spoke, was unrecognizable. The soft, accommodating tone of Ben Carter was gone, replaced by the quiet, unyielding authority of Artisan X. Liquidate positions 7 and 9, he said, his words precise and cold, and activate the Aegis protocol, immediately. There was no question from the other end, only a calm, consider it done. The call ended. Ben stared at the blank screen. The first domino in a long, intricate chain now tipped, its fall echoing silently from a private bank in Switzerland, all the way back to this quiet, sun-drenched street in Echo Park. His old Ford F-150, with its dented fender and a fine, permanent layer of sawdust on the dashboard, was an object of profound and jarring humility in the subterranean valet garage of the Century City skyscraper. Surrounded by a gleaming sea of black Mercedes, silver Bentleys, and one particularly obnoxious lime green Lamborghini, his truck looked like a creature from another, more honest planet. He handed the keys to a valet whose expression was a perfect, practiced mask of professional indifference, though Ben could see the flicker of confusion in his eyes. Ben himself was an anomaly, his worn work boots echoing on the polished concrete, his canvas jacket a stark textural contrast to the smooth, tailored suits of the men striding past him. He felt their glances, the quick, dismissive appraisals that cataloged him as a delivery man, a maintenance worker, someone who belonged in the building's service corridors, not its penthouse suites. He felt no shame, no inadequacy. Instead, he felt a strange sense of power in his invisibility, the quiet confidence of a predator hiding in plain sight. The elevator ride to the 52nd floor was a silent, pressurized ascent into another world. The doors opened onto a reception area of breathtaking minimalist expense, floors of Italian marble, walls of glass offering a godlike view of the sprawling city below, and a single massive abstract painting that he knew, as Artisan X, had been commissioned for $250,000. He walked to the reception desk, the woman's polite smile tightening slightly as she took in his appearance. "I'm here to see Julian Croft," he said. "The name is Carter, Ben Carter." The name meant nothing to her, but 5 minutes later, he was being ushered into an office that smelled of old leather, expensive scotch, and the dry, papery scent of immense, unassailable power. Julian Croft, a man who looked more like a retired Silver Fox movie star than a lawyer, rose to greet him, his hand outstretched, his eyes sharp and analytical. Ben didn't waste time with pleasantries. He placed the encrypted laptop on a desk made from a single, flawless slab of Macassar ebony. A desk, ironically, he had been anonymously commissioned to design 3 years prior, and played the video. Julian watched without a flicker of emotion, his gaze fixed on the screen, and when it was over, he leaned back in his chair, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "Well, Mr. Carter," he said, his voice a low, dangerous purr, "she's not just leaving you. She's committing felony grand larceny and conspiracy to commit fraud. The beautiful thing about California law is that we can make this hurt in ways she can't even begin to imagine." The private banking office in Beverly Hills was the antithesis of Julian Croft's Shark Tank. It was designed to feel like a luxurious, impossibly quiet living room, with plush carpets that swallowed the sound of footsteps and soft, ambient lighting that made everyone look healthier and richer. There was no teller window, no velvet rope, just a discreet receptionist who offered him sparkling water in a heavy crystal glass and led him to a private suite overlooking a manicured Zen garden. His financial manager, a woman named Evelyn Reed, was the personification of the bank itself, impeccably dressed, unnervingly calm, and radiating an aura of absolute discretion. She had managed the Artisan X accounts for 8 years, transforming his massive, sporadic commission payments into a diversified global portfolio of stocks, real estate, and private equity. She had never asked about the source of the funds beyond the initial rigorous vetting process, and she had never flinched at the dizzying sums that flowed through the accounts. Ben sat across from her at a simple, elegant teak table, the encrypted laptop between them. He didn't need to show her the video. He simply explained the situation in cold, clinical terms. "I need to create a firewall," he said, his voice steady. "A financial fortress. I need to move the entire principal into an irrevocable trust, effective immediately." Evelyn nodded slowly, her fingers tapping silently on a tablet. "The beneficiary?" she asked. "For now," Ben said, a bitter taste in his mouth. "Listed as a charitable fund for aspiring artisans. We can amend it later. The key is that as of this moment, my personal net worth needs to be legally and verifiably reduced to the assets of my declared business. $55,000 a year, a mortgaged house, and a 10-year-old truck." Evelyn's fingers flew across the screen, her expression unchanging. She was not a therapist or a friend. She was a master architect of financial structures. "We can establish a new shell corporation," she said, her voice a soothing murmur. "It will become the sole trustee. It will be domiciled in Delaware for anonymity, with its ownership traced back to a holding company in the Caymans. By the time any divorce attorney starts digging, they'll be chasing a ghost through a hall of mirrors. and they'll find nothing but an empty room. He watched as she initiated the transfers. The numbers on her screen. Numbers that represented a decade of his life, his secret, his dream, dissolving and reforming into an impenetrable legal structure. The $28 million ceased to be his. It was now the property of an abstract entity, a weapon waiting to be aimed. With his fortune now safely entombed in a legal labyrinth, Ben began the next phase of his operation. He sat in his truck, parked on a quiet tree-lined street in Beverly Hills, and began to activate the true source of his power, the Artisan X network. This was a network built not on money, but on a foundation of mutual respect, artistic integrity, and the shared secrets of the ultra-wealthy. His first call was to a man named Marcus Thorne, a notoriously reclusive tech billionaire in Palo Alto for whom Ben had designed an entire house full of furniture, including a meditation chamber made from a single fallen redwood tree. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Artisan," he said, his voice warm. "To what do I owe the honor?" Ben kept his tone even, professional. "Marcus, I need a favor. I need the name of the best opposition research firm in Los Angeles. The kind of people who can find out what a man had for breakfast 10 years ago. Price is no object. Discretion is everything." There was a pause, and then Marcus chuckled. "Someone giving you trouble? Say no more. I'll have my chief of staff text you a contact. They're not a firm, they're a scalpel. Use it wisely." His next call was to an aging, legendary film producer named Alistair Finch. Ben had restored a collection of antique Biedermeier furniture for Alistair, a job so delicate and complex that it had earned him the producer's undying loyalty. "Alistair," Ben began, "I have a strange request. I'm looking to anonymously sponsor an event, a party, at a very specific, very chic art gallery in the Hollywood Arts District." He named the gallery, one he knew Serena coveted as a venue, a place whose rental fee was astronomical. Alistair was silent for a moment. "That's my ex-wife's gallery," he said, a note of amusement in his voice. She'd never rent it to a nobody, but an anonymous donation from a patron introduced by me. She'll roll out the red carpet. What's the occasion? Ben allowed a small, cold smile to touch his lips. "It's for my wife," he said. "A surprise anniversary party." The lie felt smooth and practiced on his tongue. He made 2 more calls, one to a celebrity interior designer who owed him for a last-minute ghost design that had saved her career, and another to a high-end event planner. By the time the sun began to dip below the Hollywood Hills, the pieces were in motion. He was no longer just building a legal case. He was producing a full-scale theatrical event, with Serena and Preston as the unwitting lead actors in a tragedy of their own making. He drove back to Echo Park as the city lights began to glitter to life, a sprawling, indifferent constellation of a million other lives. He pulled the truck into the driveway and killed the engine, but he didn't get out. He looked at the small craftsman bungalow, at the soft, warm light spilling from the living room window where Serena was likely scrolling through her phone, blissfully unaware of the storm that was gathering just beyond her curated horizon. The man who had left this house that morning was a ghost, a hollowed-out shell of grief and betrayal. The man who returned was someone else entirely. He was a general who had spent the day marshaling his armies, securing his supply lines, and drawing the battle plans for a war his enemy didn't even know had been declared. He reached over and opened the glove compartment, his fingers brushing past old registration papers and a tire pressure gauge until they found what he was looking for. A small, smooth piece of rosewood, a leftover scrap from the box he had carved for her a lifetime ago. He held it in his palm, the wood warm and familiar, its grain a complex, beautiful map of a life lived. He felt no sadness, no nostalgia. The object was no longer a symbol of his love, but a reminder of his purpose. It was a whetstone against which he was sharpening his resolve. He had spent 10 years as a builder, meticulously constructing a future. Now, he would become a deconstructionist. He would apply the same patience, the same precision, the same obsessive attention to detail to the systematic dismantling of Serena's life. His phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. It contained only a street address and a name, Preston Holloway. Beneath it was a link to a password-protected file. The scalpel had made its first incision. The trap was now baited. The final pieces were moving into place, and the countdown to the anniversary party had officially begun. The air in the bungalow was different. The sterile, curated silence he had left that morning had been replaced by a thick, predatory stillness. He knew it the moment he turned the key in the lock. It was the feeling a forest animal gets just before the trap springs. a subtle shift in the atmospheric pressure that signals imminent danger. He pushed the door open and the source of the disturbance became immediately, nauseatingly clear. Preston Holloway was there, an invasive species in the habitat of his home, perched on the white linen sofa as if it were a throne he had just usurped. He was wearing a suit of a shiny, vaguely blue material that was trying desperately to look like Italian wool but screamed polyester blend. His shoes were a garish, pointed brown, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the cold overhead lights. He was a caricature of wealth, a cheap knockoff of the very men Ben secretly served. And beside him, looking not at Ben but at Preston, was Serena. Her posture was different. The feigned victimhood of the robbery was gone, replaced by a rigid, triumphant confidence. Her arms were crossed, her chin was high, and a small, cruel smile played on her lips. On the glass coffee table between them, arranged with the precision of a military briefing, was a thick stack of professionally bound documents. The top page was stark and brutal. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Ben felt a strange, cold calm settle over him. There was no shock, no pain, only the quiet, grim satisfaction of a strategist, watching his opponent move exactly as predicted. He met Preston's smug, reptilian gaze, a gaze that was meant to intimidate and dominate, and felt nothing but a profound, analytical contempt. This was the moment they believed was their checkmate, completely unaware that he had already moved his queen into position, and the game was, for all intents and purposes, already over. "Ben, we need to talk," Serena began, her voice devoid of any emotion except a brittle, rehearsed finality. It was the voice of a CEO firing a redundant employee, not a wife ending a decade-long marriage. Preston remained silent, a smug gargoyle on the sidelines, letting her deliver the killing blow he had so clearly coached her to perform. She gestured towards the documents on the table. "It's over. I've filed. My attorney has been very clear about the terms." She spoke the words, "my attorney," with a newfound reverence, as if the phrase itself granted her a power she had never possessed. She picked up a single sheet, a summary of their demands, and began to read from it in a flat monotone, each word a carefully chosen stone meant to crush him. She was demanding the house, citing the emotional distress of the robbery and his inability to provide a secure environment. She was demanding spousal support, a figure calculated based on a lifestyle he had never been able to afford her, a lifestyle he now knew he had been funding through his own stolen money. She was even demanding a 50% stake in his carpentry business, which she referred to as a community asset, a final bitter irony that almost made him laugh out loud. He listened, his face a carefully constructed mask of weary resignation, but inside, his mind was a whirlwind of cold, precise calculations. He could hear Julian Croft's voice in his ear. "Let them get greedy, Ben. Let them put it all in writing. Every outrageous demand is another nail they hammer into their own coffin." He looked at her, at this stranger wearing his wife's face, and saw not a woman, but a legal liability, a walking, talking testament to fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Her list of demands wasn't a weapon against him. It was a signed confession, and he was letting her read it into the official record of his memory. Preston finally spoke, his voice as slick and synthetic as his suit. "Look, buddy," he said, leaning forward with an air of condescending magnanimity. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Serena's been through a lot. The robbery, your lack of ambition. A judge is going to see that. Sign the papers, walk away, and you can get back to your workshop." The dismissive way he said workshop was designed to emasculate, to reduce Ben's entire world to a dirty, irrelevant hobby. He slid a pen across the glass table, a ridiculously ostentatious gold-plated fountain pen that was probably a cheap Chinese replica. "Just sign here and here," he said, tapping a manicured finger on the signature lines. Ben looked from Preston's smug face to Serena's cold, expectant one. He let the silence stretch, filling the sterile room with a tension so thick he could taste it. He allowed a flicker of what he hoped looked like heartbroken defeat to cross his features. He let his shoulders slump. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of a man at the end of his rope. He was giving them the performance they craved, the final affirmation of their superiority. He picked up the pen. It felt unnaturally heavy and cold in his hand, a cheap, gilded weapon they were handing him to commit his own symbolic suicide. He uncapped it, the click echoing in the silent room. He could feel their eyes on him, two pairs of predatory sights trained on their prey, waiting for the final capitulation. He lowered the nib to the page, the black ink pregnant with a truth they could never comprehend. That this signature was not an act of surrender, but the trigger for an ambush they had meticulously helped him set. He signed his name, the loops and strokes of his signature flowing onto the page with a steady, deliberate hand. It was the signature of Ben Carter, the dirty carpenter, the man they thought they had broken. But the intent behind it, the cold, calculating force guiding his hand, belonged entirely to Artisan X. He signed the second page, and the third, his movements unhurried, almost serene. With each signature, he felt a weight lift, not the weight of his marriage, but the weight of his deception. He was no longer bound to the fantasy of surprising her, of saving her. He was free. He was free to be the man she had never bothered to see, the man who was about to dismantle her world with the same precision he used to cut a perfect dovetail joint. He pushed the stack of papers, now bearing the full legal weight of his consent, back across the table. Preston snatched them up, a triumphant gleam in his eyes as he scanned the signatures, as if he couldn't quite believe his victory had been so effortless. Serena let out a long, slow breath, a sound of profound relief, the exhalation of a con artist who has just successfully landed her mark. "You have 24 hours to gather your personal belongings," she said, her voice hard and final. "I'll have the locks changed tomorrow." Ben simply nodded, his face a blank canvas onto which they could project their victory. He stood up, his body feeling strangely light. He didn't look at them again. He walked towards the door to the life he had built, the home he had paid for, and felt nothing but the thrilling, icy promise of what was to come. He stepped out into the cool evening air, closing the door behind him with a soft, definitive click, leaving them to celebrate in the ruins of a life they thought they had conquered, utterly oblivious to the fact that they were now standing in the kill zone of a perfectly executed trap. The art gallery was a temple built to Serena's aspirations, a cavernous white space where the air itself felt expensive. It smelled of champagne, subtle, costly perfumes, and the faint ozonic tang of ambition. Ben stood near the back, a ghost in a Tom Ford suit that felt less like clothing and more like a second skin, a tailored armor that had cost more than his truck. The fabric was a deep charcoal, almost black, and it moved with a quiet authority he was only just beginning to inhabit. He watched her on the small, elevated stage, bathed in the soft glow of a spotlight, a single flute of champagne held in her hand like a scepter. She was a vision of tragic elegance, her voice trembling with practiced emotion as she recounted the horrific violation of their staged burglary. The crowd, a carefully curated collection of her influencer friends, minor celebrities, and assorted sycophants, hung on her every word, their faces a symphony of sympathetic pity. Ben felt a profound, chilling detachment, the clinical calm of a surgeon observing a disease he was about to excise. He saw not his wife, but a performer hitting every mark in a well-rehearsed play. He noted the way she dabbed a perfectly dry eye with her fingertip, the slight catch in her voice when she mentioned the loss of their dreams. Beside the stage, Preston Holloway stood beaming, a proud director watching his star pupil. He was a cheap suit in a room of bespoke tailoring, a garish imitation of the power he so desperately craved. Serena raised her glass, the crystal catching the light. "But tragedy can also be a catalyst for rebirth," she announced, her voice ringing with newfound strength. "And that is why I am so thrilled to finally introduce my new business partner and the co-founder of our new venture, Preston Holloway." As the crowd erupted in polite, enthusiastic applause and Preston stepped onto the stage to join her, a triumphant smirk plastered on his face, Ben gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to the technician in the control booth, signaling that the overture was over and the final brutal act was about to begin. The applause died abruptly, swallowed by a sudden, jarring silence as the massive video screens flanking the stage flickered from Serena's curated brand logo to the cold, unforgiving reality of his workshop's security camera footage. The image was stark and silent at first. The back of their bungalow, the bougainvillea bush swaying gently in the afternoon light. A collective murmur of confusion rippled through the gallery, a sound like rustling leaves before a storm. Serena and Preston turned, their triumphant smiles freezing on their faces, replaced by masks of bewildered disbelief. Then, Serena appeared on screen, her movements calm and methodical, a stark contradiction to the hysterical victim she had just portrayed. The crowd gasped as one, a single sharp intake of breath that seemed to suck the very air from the room. They watched in stunned silence as she placed the rosewood box on the patio table. As she emptied the cash, his cash, into a designer handbag, the scene shifted from a confusing technical glitch to a public vivisection. The audio kicked in, and Serena's light, carefree laughter filled the pristine gallery, a sound so joyous and so venomous it made Ben's teeth ache. "Like clockwork, babe," her on-screen voice chirped as Preston's smug face appeared on her phone. Then came the words that landed like a physical blow in the silent room. "The big, dumb carpenter will come running home to save his damsel in distress." Ben watched Serena's real-life face crumble. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving a pasty gray canvas for the abject horror that bloomed in her eyes. The champagne flute slipped from her trembling fingers and shattered on the white stage, the sound as sharp and final as a gunshot. Beside her, Preston looked like a cornered animal, his spray tan suddenly looking orange and sickly under the harsh lights, his eyes darting wildly, searching for an escape that did not exist. The video ended, leaving her final, triumphant words hanging in the dead air. "Freedom is so close, babe." Ben began to move then, his steps slow and deliberate as he walked from the back of the room toward the stage, parting the frozen, silent sea of shocked faces that turned to watch him approach. If you are enjoying this story of betrayal and calculated justice, please like this video. It helps us bring you more stories like this. He ascended the 3 short steps to the stage, his polished leather shoes making no sound. The world had shrunk to this small, white platform, the bright lights rendering the stunned faces of the crowd into a blurry, indistinct mass. All he could see with perfect crystalline clarity were the 2 people standing before him, their grand performance now a pile of smoking ruins. Serena was sobbing now, not the performative, delicate tears from her speech, but ugly, gasping sobs of pure, animal terror. Preston was frozen, his mouth slightly agape, a statue of third-rate ambition that had just been struck by lightning. Ben walked past them to the lectern, his movements calm and unhurried. He picked up the microphone, the metal cool and heavy in his hand. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The silence in the gallery was absolute, a perfect vessel for the words he was about to speak. He looked out at the sea of phones that were now all recording, capturing the final, humiliating moments of Serena's curated life. "It seems," he began, his voice even and cold, resonating through the high-end speakers with chilling precision. The thief was already in the house. He paused, letting the words land, letting the full weight of the implication settle over the room. Then, he turned his head slowly and looked directly at Serena, his eyes devoid of hatred, of love, of anything but a vast, empty finality. "And by the way," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow louder than a scream, "I'm Artisan X." At that exact moment, as a new wave of shocked gasps swept through the gallery, the main doors at the back of the room swung open. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside, followed by a calm, impeccably dressed Julian Croft, who held up a file for them to see. Serena's head snapped up at the sight of them, her eyes red and swollen, locking with Ben's one last time, and in them, he finally saw it. Not the face of the woman he had once loved, but the terrified, uncomprehending stare of a common thief who had just realized she had tried to rob a fortress with a hammer. 6 months later, the air tasted of salt and eucalyptus. Ben's new workshop was a cathedral of light and air, carved into the side of a Topanga Canyon cliff, its floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the vast, indifferent blue of the Pacific. The relentless hum of the city was a distant memory, replaced by the rhythmic sigh of the ocean and the occasional cry of a red-tailed hawk circling in the thermals. He was no longer hiding. The name Artisan X was no longer a secret whispered among the elite, but a public brand synonymous with unparalleled craftsmanship and unshakable integrity. He ran a hand over the massive slab of Claro walnut that rested on his new workbench. A single piece of timber so rare and perfectly figured, it looked like a topographical map of a distant planet. This wasn't a commission for a tech mogul or a movie star. It was a dining table for his own small cliffside home, a testament to a life he was now building for himself, by himself. The frantic, secret hustle was gone, replaced by a quiet, deliberate pace. He took on only the projects that spoke to his soul, and he had established an irrevocable trust, the Artisan Fund, that provided scholarships and grants to young woodworkers who, like him, believed in the honesty of working with their hands. He was wiping a thin coat of tung oil onto the wood, the rich, nutty scent filling the space, when he saw the crisp, cream-colored envelope on the corner of his desk. It was from Julian Croft. He picked it up, his hand steady, and slid it open with the edge of a chisel. Inside, the legal language was cold, precise, and absolute. Serena had been sentenced to 3 to 5 years for grand larceny and conspiracy to commit fraud. The judge unmoved by her tearful, last-ditch performance of a woman led astray. Preston, it turned out, had a history of similar scams, and was facing a much longer stretch for a litany of charges that stretched across 3 states. The Echo Park bungalow had been sold at auction to cover legal fees. Her social media presence had been wiped from the internet, a digital ghost erased by the harsh reality of her crimes. He folded the letter, the paper cool against his skin, and felt not a shred of triumph, only a profound, quiet pity for the hollowness of what they had chased. They had tried to steal a future they couldn't even comprehend, a future built on a foundation they were incapable of valuing. He placed the letter down, the final punctuation mark on a chapter of his life he was now officially closing. The setting sun painted the canyon in hues of orange and deep violet, the light streaming into the workshop and setting the grains of the walnut slab ablaze with a fiery internal light. He looked at his hands, no longer a source of shame, but the instruments of his salvation. They were calloused and strong, with fine lines of sawdust permanently etched into the skin around his knuckles. These were the hands of a dirty carpenter, and he had never been more proud of them. He thought of Serena's obsession with price tags, with brand names, with the superficial gloss of a life she saw on a screen. She and Preston had understood the price of everything. The Audemars Piguet watch, the Toomey briefcase, the Hollywood Art Gallery, but they had understood the value of nothing. They couldn't value the silent conversation between a man and a piece of wood, the decades of patience required to master a craft, the simple, profound satisfaction of creating something real and true in a world of illusions. The $28 million had never been the point. It had been a means to an end, a tool, just like the handplane or the chisel that lay on his bench. The true fortune was this: the scent of the wood, the warmth of the setting sun on his face, the quiet hum of purpose that now filled his days. He had once planned to give her a mansion, a grand, empty gesture to prove his worth. He now realized that the Dream Home Fund had never been about a house made of glass and steel, but about building a life on a foundation of integrity. He picked up his oilcloth and made another long, slow pass over the wood, feeling the smooth, honest surface come to life beneath his touch. Finally understanding that the most valuable things in the world weren't the ones you could buy, but the ones you had to build. True wealth is not measured by the figures in a bank account, but by the strength of one's character and the integrity of one's work. Ben's story is a powerful reminder that while money can be stolen and reputations can be faked, the value of authenticity and quiet dedication is a fortress that can never be breached. What do you think is the true meaning of success? Share your thoughts in the comments below.